Daniel lived an ordinary life, or at least he thought so. He was 26, worked at a small bookshop downtown, and spent most of his evenings reading old science fiction novels or cooking simple meals in his one-bedroom apartment. His life was quiet, predictable, and comfortable. He was not the kind of man who went looking for adventures. In fact, he believed adventures belonged in the pages of books, not in real life. On one particular evening, Daniel had just returned from work. The day had been long, filled with the sound of customers asking for rare titles, the smell of dust on old pages, and the quiet hum of the shop's ceiling fan. He placed his keys on the table, kicked off his shoes, and sighed with relief. Home was his safe place, his small world where nothing surprising ever happened. He decided to take a shower before dinner. Steam filled the bathroom as he turned on the water, waiting for it to warm. He hummed a tune quietly, already thinking about what he might cook later. It was then, just as he reached for his towel, that he heard something unusual. A faint crackling sound, like static electricity, but louder, almost like the tearing of fabric. Daniel frowned. The sound was not coming from the pipes nor from the fan. It seemed to come from inside the bathroom itself, as if the air was splitting. He stepped back, his heart beginning to beat faster. The crackling grew louder, and suddenly, before his eyes, a circle of light appeared in the center of his shower. At first, he thought it was some strange reflection, perhaps a trick of the light. But the circle grew wider, brighter, pulsing with energy. Sparks flew from it, touching the tiled walls without leaving a mark. The steam from the shower seemed to bend and swirl around it, as if pulled into the glowing hole. Daniel rubbed his eyes, convinced he was tired or dreaming. But when he looked again, the portal was still there, glowing, humming, and impossible to ignore. Then it happened. Out of the light stepped a figure. She emerged slowly. First a foot covered in silver boots, then the outline of a tall, confident woman. She wore strange armor that shimmered with faint blue light. Her hair was dark, tied back tightly, and her eyes scanned the room with sharp focus. She looked as though she had walked straight out of one of the science fiction books Daniel sold at work. Daniel froze. His towel slipped from his hand, forgotten. The woman stepped fully out of the portal, and just like that, the circle of light closed behind her with a final crackle. She was now standing in Daniel's shower, water still running around her boots, steam curling through the air. Her expression was calm, as if she had expected this place, expected him. Her eyes moved slowly over Daniel, studying him with quiet interest. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Daniel's heart raced. His mind screamed for him to say something, anything, but words refused to form. He could not believe what he was seeing. Finally, the woman's lips curved into a small, knowing smirk. She tilted her head slightly as though amused by his frozen reaction. And then, without a word, she stepped aside, crossing her arms and leaning casually against the tiled wall of his bathroom, as if she had every right to be there. Daniel blinked rapidly. "Who are you?" he managed to whisper, his voice shaking. The woman did not answer immediately. Instead, she glanced at the shower controls, at the mirror fogged with steam, at the small bathroom that was clearly not designed for visitors from another world. Then she looked back at him, her smirk deepening. Daniel took a step back, bumping into the door. His instincts told him to run, to leave the apartment and call someone, anyone. But another part of him, curiosity perhaps, kept him rooted to the spot. He had always imagined meeting someone from another world, but never like this, never in his own shower. You're not supposed to be here," he said weakly, almost to himself. The woman raised an eyebrow but still said nothing. Her silence was both unsettling and strangely commanding. It was as if she was in complete control of the situation, while Daniel was merely a bystander in his own home. Minutes passed like hours. The steam continued to rise, the water continued to run, and the strange woman simply stood there watching him. Daniel's mind raced with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why was she in his shower? And why did she look so calm, so sure of herself? Finally, Daniel gathered enough courage to move. He reached past her, turning off the water with a shaky hand. The room grew quieter, the only sound now the faint drip of droplets from the shower head. He stepped back again, giving her as much space as possible. The woman uncrossed her arms and finally spoke. Her voice was smooth, steady, and carried a faint accent that Daniel could not place. "Interesting," she said, as if testing the word. "So this is where I arrived." Daniel's eyes widened. "Arrived? From where?" She gave no direct answer. Instead, she studied him again, her gaze sharp and focused as though she was measuring his worth with each glance. And then she did something that made Daniel's heart skip a beat. She stayed. She did not try to leave, did not apologize for intruding, did not act lost. She behaved as if she had made a choice. She was going to remain exactly where she was. Daniel's confusion grew. He wanted answers, but something about her presence made it difficult to demand them. Her smirk, her calmness, and her silence created a strange tension in the room. This was no accident, Daniel realized. She had come here for a reason, and whether he liked it or not, his quiet, predictable life had just ended. Daniel did not sleep that night. His small apartment, once a quiet place, now felt like the center of a mystery he could not explain. The strange woman from the glowing portal had made herself comfortable, not in a loud or rude way, but with a quiet confidence that told him she had no intention of leaving. After turning off the shower, Daniel had offered her a towel and pointed to a chair in the living room. She had taken the towel, dried her hands without hesitation, and sat down like she had always lived there. Daniel had stared at her for several long moments, unable to decide if he should call the police, an ambulance, or perhaps a scientist. But she didn't look dangerous, and something in her eyes, sharp but calm, told him that rushing for help might not be wise. Finally, he had forced himself to speak. "Who are you?" Daniel asked again, this time more firmly. The woman looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "My name would not mean much to you," she replied. "But you may call me Arya." "Arya," Daniel repeated slowly as though tasting the name. "All right, Arya. Where did you come from? And how exactly did you appear in my shower?" She leaned back slightly in the chair, her armored boots leaving faint marks on his carpet. Her smirk returned. "I came from far away, a place your people have not yet reached. The method, as you saw, is called teleportation. It is still unstable." Daniel's mouth went dry. Far away. Teleportation. The words sounded like fragments of a dream or like the plot of one of his books, and yet here she was sitting in his living room, explaining it as casually as someone might describe taking a bus. "Unstable?" Daniel repeated. "Yes," Arya said. "The calculations were not perfect. I was supposed to arrive in a safe zone prepared for me. Instead, I ended up here." Her eyes flicked toward the bathroom door, a miscalculation by my people, but she paused, her gaze returning to Daniel, sharp and searching. "I think this place may serve me better." Daniel blinked. "Better? What do you mean?" Arya did not answer immediately. Instead, she stood up, walked slowly around the room, and studied everything with careful curiosity. She examined the books stacked neatly on his shelf, the photographs on the wall, the warm lamp that filled the space with golden light. Each item seemed to capture her attention, as though she had never seen such things before. "You live simply," she said finally. "But there is character here, small things that matter to you." Daniel frowned, unsure what she meant. "You still haven't answered my question," he said cautiously. "Why are you here? What's your purpose?" Arya turned back to him, her expression shifting from amusement to seriousness. She crossed her arms and spoke with measured words. "I am a scout," she said. "My people have been testing new travel technology. My mission was to arrive in a safe location on an uninhabited world, collect environmental data, and return. But instead I arrived here, your world, your home." Daniel tried to process her words. "So, you're saying you're an explorer? From another planet?" Arya tilted her head slightly. "That is close enough." He rubbed his temples, struggling to keep calm. "All right. Let's say I believe you. Then what are you going to do now? Try again? Go back?" Her eyes softened, but her smirk returned just slightly. "No, I will stay." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "Stay? Here? In my apartment?" "For now," she said. "This place is safe. And you?" She studied him again with that unsettling gaze. "You are useful. You know this world. You can help me." Daniel almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Me? I'm just a normal guy. I sell books. I don't know anything about aliens or teleportation or—" "That is why you are useful," Arya interrupted. Her tone was firm, leaving no room for argument. "You are not a soldier. You are not a politician. You are ordinary. And through you I can learn what makes your people strong." Daniel fell silent. There was no arrogance in her words, only certainty. She was here for a reason. and she had chosen him as her guide, whether he liked it or not. The night stretched on as they talked. Daniel asked cautious questions, and Arya gave answers that were both fascinating and frustrating. She spoke of her people in vague terms, never naming her home or describing it in detail. What she did reveal was enough to shake Daniel's view of the universe. Her society had mastered technology that allowed travel not through space, but through folds in reality itself. They had grown beyond hunger, beyond disease, beyond many of the struggles that filled Daniel's news every day. And yet, as she spoke, Daniel noticed something odd in her voice, an emptiness, a lack of warmth when she described her world. When Daniel asked about art, music, or family, Arya's eyes flickered with curiosity, but her answers were short. Her people, it seemed, valued efficiency over beauty, order over creativity. It was as though her society had advanced so far that they had left behind the simple joys Daniel took for granted. At one point, Arya picked up one of his books, an old paperback with a worn cover. She turned it over in her hands carefully. "This," she said, "is strange. Words printed on paper. You spend hours reading them, imagining worlds inside your mind. My people do not do this anymore." Daniel managed a small smile. "That's a shame. Stories are important. They make life richer." Arya's eyes met his, and for a brief moment the smirk disappeared. She looked thoughtful, almost vulnerable, as if considering something new for the first time. By the time the clock struck midnight, Daniel realized he was no longer afraid. Confused, yes. Overwhelmed, absolutely, but not afraid. Arya did not seem like an enemy. She was a mystery, yes, but also someone searching for something she could not find among her own people. As Daniel finally stood to prepare a bed for her on the couch, Arya spoke again. "You still do not believe I came by accident, do you?" she asked quietly. Daniel paused, surprised by the question. "Honestly, no. It doesn't feel like an accident. It feels like you meant to be here." Her smirk returned, softer this time. "Perhaps you are right." And with that, she lay back on the couch, her strange armor gleaming faintly in the dim light. Daniel turned off the lamp and stood there for a long moment, watching her, wondering what tomorrow would bring. His quiet life was gone, replaced by something larger, stranger, and far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. For the first time in years, Daniel felt the spark of adventure, the kind he used to read about in books. Only this time it was real, and Arya had no plans of leaving. The next morning, Daniel woke earlier than usual. His mind had not rested well, full of strange dreams about glowing portals, endless stars, and a woman in shining armor sitting calmly in his living room. When he opened his eyes and saw his apartment again, he half expected it all to have been imagination, but it was real. Arya was still there. She was sitting at the small dining table, carefully examining a spoon as if it were an alien artifact. Her armor reflected the pale morning light coming through the window, and her expression was one of quiet study. Daniel rubbed his eyes. "You know," he said, yawning, "that's just a spoon. Nothing special." Arya looked up at him. "This object is designed for eating, yes?" "Yeah, for soup, cereal, stuff like that." She tilted her head, turning the spoon in her hand. "Interesting. My people eat differently. Our food is processed into blocks or liquid forms. No need for tools like this," Daniel chuckled. "Well, here, food isn't just about energy. It's about taste, about enjoying the moment. Want me to show you?" Arya raised an eyebrow but gave a small nod. Daniel went into the kitchen. He didn't have much in the fridge, but he could make something simple: scrambled eggs and toast. As the pan warmed, he cracked the eggs, added a bit of butter, and stirred slowly. The smell began to spread through the small apartment. Arya leaned closer, her nose wrinkling in curiosity. "What is that smell?" "Breakfast," Daniel said with a grin. "One of the best parts of being human." She watched carefully as he cooked, almost as if she were studying a scientific experiment. When he placed the eggs and toast on a plate in front of her, she poked the food gently with the spoon. Daniel laughed. "It's not dangerous. Just try it." Arya hesitated, then took a bite. Her eyes widened slightly. She chewed slowly, her expression unreadable at first. Then, after a long moment, she gave a short nod. "Strange texture," she said, "but pleasing, warm, different." Daniel smiled. "See? Food can make you feel something, not just fill your stomach." Arya considered this silently as she continued eating. For Daniel, it was a small victory. For the first time, He felt less like a frightened host and more like a guide. As the day went on, Arya explored more of Daniel's world. She asked endless questions about the objects in his home, the pictures on the wall, the glowing screen of his television. "This device shows moving images," she asked, pointing to the TV. "Yeah," Daniel said. "We use it for entertainment, news, sometimes learning." Arya frowned. "Why would you watch events that are not real?" "Because stories matter," Daniel explained. "They let us feel things, imagine things, escape for a while." She thought about this, then smirked. "So you prefer illusions over truth?" Daniel shook his head. "Not exactly. Stories can teach truth in a different way. They show us what could be, not just what is." Arya did not reply, but he could see she was thinking deeply. Later that afternoon, Daniel decided to take her outside. He couldn't keep her hidden forever, and he thought she needed to see the world beyond his apartment. They walked down the street together. Daniel wore his usual jeans and jacket, but Arya still had her silver armor. Strangely, no one gave her more than a passing glance. Some people probably assumed it was a costume. Arya looked around with open curiosity. Cars rushed past, children laughed in a park, an old man fed pigeons on a bench. Everyday sights for Daniel, but Arya studied each one as if it were extraordinary. She stopped at a street vendor selling ice cream. The colorful cones caught her attention. "What is this?" she asked. Daniel grinned. "That, my friend, is ice cream. Sweet, cold, and amazing." He bought 2 cones, handing one to her. Arya examined it closely. "This melts," she noted. "Yeah, so eat it quickly." She took a cautious lick. Her eyes widened again. "Cold, very cold. But sweet, very sweet," Daniel laughed. "Told you it's amazing." Arya smirked faintly. "This ice cream, I think I like it." For the next few minutes, they sat on a bench eating their cones. Daniel noticed how Arya's expression softened when she watched children running by with balloons. There was something almost wistful in her eyes, as if she were remembering something she had never actually experienced. But not everything was easy. Their differences sometimes clashed. When Daniel showed her his phone, she took it apart in seconds, pulling off the back cover and studying the circuits. "Hey," Daniel protested. "That's not a toy." Arya smirked. "Your technology is simple, fragile. This is amusing." "It's not fragile if you don't tear it apart," he said, grabbing it back. Another time, Daniel tried to explain the idea of money. Arya was confused. "You trade paper for survival? You give coins for food? Why not just share resources freely?" "Because that's how our society works," Daniel said. "Not everyone agrees on what's fair, so money helps organize things." Arya shook her head. "I see only complication. My people would not waste time with this system." Daniel sighed. "Well, maybe your people don't understand what it means to struggle." The words hung between them for a moment. Arya's smirk faded. She looked away, as if the thought had struck deeper than Daniel expected. That evening, back in the apartment, Daniel found Arya standing by the window, looking at the city lights. "Your world is noisy," she said softly. "Busy, messy, and yet alive." Daniel joined her at the window. "Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's ours." Arya turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Where I come from, everything is controlled, clean, predictable, but I do not feel alive there the way I do here." Daniel studied her, surprised by her honesty. For the first time, she did not smirk. She looked almost human in her vulnerability. "You know," Daniel said gently, "maybe that's why you stayed. Maybe you wanted to see what life is like when it's not perfect." Arya did not answer. She only looked back out at the lights, her eyes reflecting both wonder and uncertainty. That night, as Daniel prepared for bed, he realized something had changed. He was no longer just hosting a stranger. He was sharing his world with someone who had never known its colors, tastes, and chaos. And though they clashed at times, he could see that Arya was learning, and maybe, just maybe, she was starting to feel at home. Daniel lay down, staring at the ceiling. His quiet life had turned upside down, but he couldn't deny it anymore. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't bored, and tomorrow, he suspected, would be even stranger. Days turned into a strange rhythm for Daniel and Arya. In the mornings, Daniel went about his usual routine, making breakfast and preparing for work. Arya followed, asking questions about everything: the toaster, the bus he sometimes rode, the lines of people waiting for coffee. In the evenings, they would sit together and Daniel would tell her stories about history, movies, or simple childhood memories. At first, Daniel thought she was just curious. But slowly he began to sense something deeper. Arya wasn't only observing, she was studying. She often asked questions and patterns, repeating them with slight changes as if collecting data. Her eyes always seemed to measure, to calculate. One evening, while Daniel cooked pasta, Arya sat at the table flipping through one of his notebooks. He had scribbled notes about the day, trying to make sense of his new guest. "You are writing about me," Arya said without looking up. Daniel froze. "Well, yeah." "You're kind of hard to forget." Her smirk appeared. "And what conclusions have you written?" "That you're confusing," Daniel admitted. "Half the time you act like you don't understand us. The other half it feels like you already know more than you're saying." Arya set the notebook down. Her smirk faded into seriousness. "You are not wrong." Daniel put down the spoon he was holding. "So what aren't you telling me?" Silence filled the room. The only sound was the bubbling water on the stove. Finally, Arya spoke, her voice lower than usual. "My arrival was not an accident," she confessed. Daniel's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "You told me it was a mistake." "It was easier for you to believe," Arya replied. She stood and walked slowly to the window, looking out at the night sky. "My leaders wanted me to test this world, to see if humans were truly as insignificant as our records suggested." Daniel's chest tightened. "Insignificant?" "Yes," Arya said. "To my people, your world is small, primitive. They see no reason to notice you." But I disagreed. I wanted to see for myself, so I adjusted the calculations. "I chose this place." "I chose you," Daniel's thoughts spun. "Wait, you picked me? Out of billions of people on Earth?" Arya turned back to him, her eyes steady. "Yes. Because I believed one ordinary human could show me more than any report. And I was right." Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he leaned against the counter. "So what happens now? You study us, then report back that we're—" "What? Not worth it?" Arya shook her head. "No. I've already learned something my people refuse to see. You are not weak. You create stories, art, and hope. You fight even when the odds are impossible. That is not insignificance. That is strength." Daniel looked at her in silence, his heart pounding. For the first time, he saw the weight in her eyes. She wasn't just a visitor. She was a bridge between two worlds, and her decision could shape the way her people viewed humanity. But he also saw something else. Fear. Arya was afraid, not of him, not of Earth, but of her own people. If they knew she had disobeyed, she might face consequences far greater than he could imagine. That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The truth pressed heavily on him. Arya wasn't just a guest anymore. She carried a secret that could change the future of his species, and she had chosen him to share it. The following day, everything changed. Daniel woke to the sound of a faint humming in the living room. He rushed out of bed and saw a glowing sphere hovering in the air. Arya stood in front of it, her face lit by the strange blue light. "What is that?" Daniel asked nervously. "A recall signal," Arya said softly. "My people are calling me back." Daniel's throat tightened. "So, you have to leave?" Arya did not answer immediately. She stepped closer to the sphere, her hand hovering near it. Her expression was unreadable, but Daniel saw the conflict in her eyes. "You don't want to go," Daniel said quietly. Arya turned to him, and for the first time there was no smirk, no mask, only honesty. "If I return, I must tell them what I saw, and they will not understand. They will say I am weak, that I allowed myself to be distracted by a primitive world." Daniel's voice trembled. "Then don't go. Stay here." Arya closed her eyes. "If I stay, I will be hunted. My people do not forgive disobedience. They will send others." Daniel stepped closer, his heart pounding. "Then let them come. We'll deal with it. You don't have to face them alone." For a long moment, silence filled the room. The humming sphere pulsed brighter, waiting for her decision. Finally, Arya opened her eyes. And there it was again, the smirk. But this time it wasn't cold or mocking. It was warm, almost human. "I like your courage," she said. "Very well. I will stay." She raised her hand, and instead of touching the sphere, she clenched her fist. The blue light flickered, sputtered, and finally vanished into nothing. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "You really did it," he whispered. Arya stepped closer to him. "Yes, I have chosen. I will stay and I will learn, not as a scout, not as a spy, but as a guest, perhaps even a friend. Daniel smiled, relief flooding through him. Then welcome to Earth, Arya. That night they sat together by the window, looking out at the city lights. The world outside continued as if nothing had changed. Cars honking, people laughing, neon signs glowing in the distance. But for Daniel, everything had changed. His quiet life had become extraordinary. And for Arya, who had once believed humanity was insignificant, this world had become something worth protecting, worth staying for. As the stars shone above, Daniel realized something simple yet powerful. Sometimes, it only takes one unexpected visitor to remind you that humans are far more than they appear. And Arya, smirking softly at his side, seemed to agree. Together, they faced an uncertain future. But for the first time, both of them felt exactly where they were meant to be.